Okay, welcome back to another Ace the Case interview, the final one in the Ace the Case series where we break down how to basically ace a case interview for McKinsey, BCG, Bain, and other consulting firms. This one's on closing strong, including a real BCG case or a real example of closing on a BCG case. So once again, what is CasePrepHQ? We're basically a Slack community with a whole bunch of free videos and resources started by some friends and I. We're basically all ex-McKinsey, BCG, Bain consultants, and we wanted to create a bunch of resources, but more importantly, a community where you guys could basically learn how to prepare well for a case interview, as well as discuss with each other. So I'm Zizan. I used to be a BCG consultant, and after that, I took a role in product management at a cool art marketplace startup named Redbubble. And then now I've got a head of strategy role at a logistics startup called Fulfillio. You also might be familiar with my colleague, Jack, who was a BCG consultant also. We had a bit of overlap in our time before he went on to be a strategy manager at Uber. And he since actually left that role as well to go be a strategy manager at Google as well. So very exciting. Now, so what is CasePrepHQ? Obviously, you can go to CasePrepHQ.com and basically find more videos. Obviously, the other videos in this Ace the Case series, as well as just deep examples of people solving cases and example cases and books of cases that you can try out. But most importantly, again, it's the community. It's basically when we found we were preparing, the most important things is not the written materials or anything like that, but actually the questions that you can ask and the community discussion that you can have with other people, as well as finding other people, for example, to practice with. So jump onto CasePrepHQ, join the Slack community, and start a conversation because it'll really kind of improve your case performance. So in this video, as I said, it's one of many in our Ace the Case series, breaking down steps needed to interview well on any kind of case. And what I'm going to talk about in this video is what is the interviewer looking for when I'm closing a case? And then finally, how do I kind of hit that criteria and close a case strongly with a real work example? So let's jump in. So when you're closing the case, the interviewer is really looking for a couple of questions. Number one, of course, is that does the recommendation kind of make sense based on the analysis that you've been doing with the interviewer through that whole process? Does the recommendation therefore make sense out of that? The second thing is it backed up, with relevant insights or key analysis? And then finally, does that then take that recommendation which is backed up into a kind of actionable plan in terms of next steps? And then, of course, and in fact, more than ever, your kind of mannerisms or your confidence is really important here because, for most of the case, you're role playing being in a case team. So basically having internal meetings with your case team. For this last part, you're actually role playing talking to the client. So this is where the interviewer is looking for what your kind of client facing mannerism would be. Can you project confidence? Can you express, the firm's point of view in a confident manner and get the client to kind of gain the trust of the client that you've got good advice for them, basically. So in terms of a step-by-step process to follow for this, I think the thing to caveat before you kind of jump into this step-by-step process is remember the context that you'll probably be closing in, which is that the interviewer will probably kind of drop you into the middle of this. They'll ask you to close right at the end of a piece of analysis. So you'll probably be like diving deep into some numbers and some graphs, and you'll be kind of stressed about mental maths and stuff like that, and you'll be like very micro on a problem, and then bam, the interviewer is kind of going to throw this close at you, right? So it does take a little moment to need to kind of center yourself, and that's why it's probably a good idea to have practiced this with case partners in order to kind of know this step-by-step process in the back of your mind. Other parts of the case interview process, maybe you don't want to kind of over prepare too much in case you end up looking kind of not organic, but I think this is one of those places where you can actually kind of really try to just hit a step-by-step process. So the first part of answering or closing a case Because usually, typically, the interviewer is going to ask you, you know, oh, you run into the senior client in the elevator, and they ask you how the case is going, and this is, you know, your cue to basically summarize the case. So the first part is to basically start with a clear and direct answer to the client's key question. So again, pull yourself out of that analytical weeds. Don't talk about, oh, you know, we did this and analyze this and all this kind of stuff. Because to be honest, the client doesn't care. The client wants an answer to their question. So they've asked you, you know, I have problem X, and you have to tell them the answer is Y very directly. So start with a clear and direct answer, and then back that answer up with 2 to 4 key reasons that basically are the results of your analysis. So, you know, we think you should enter this market because, you know, we did analysis on the market size and it's big. So, you know, the next part is to kind of back up your high level recommendation, but you start with the answer, then you say why. You don't build it up from the bottom, you kind of start at the top and come down. The next thing after you do is after you talk about your reasoning is the third part is you need to kind of caveat the level of confidence that you've got. And this is actually how you outperform, you know, other candidates. You kind of show that you're quite mature about your recommendation in that you know where the risks are in it, right? You kind of open book with the client about, you know, the places where, you know, this analysis is really strong, and then the places where, you know, maybe this analysis has been kind of papered over by some assumptions, and those things are risks. And, you know, that might sound like you're not having the confidence of the client, but they understand that you've been working under tight timelines. And it's actually a way to gain the client's trust by not pretending that, you know, everything's been solved necessarily, but rather, you know, we think that these are risks, probably not big risks. So, you know, here's still the answer, and it's probably the right answer. But the final part of why that's important is that also suggests a set of next steps. So usually you want to be closing your case by saying, okay, the answer is X, the reasons are Y, you know, there's some risks around that are Z. And then finally, you want to talk about these next steps that you can take from there. Usually one of the next steps is like, you know, a next step is let's take action on the recommendation. You know, I identified that you should enter market X. Let's take action on entering market X by getting to the next level of detail about doing that plan. Or the other kind of next step could be, well, yeah, looks like some of the risks are actually quite sizable risks and they're worth kind of settling before you kind of take any further action. So maybe a next step would be, but I think we need to keep doing analysis on this key risk that I identified as Z. So that's kind of the basic template that you want to be taking to closing your case. And obviously, you know, some cases will require more adherence to this, and some cases will be a little different. You might, you know, not have any risks, or there might not be a specific question as much as more like, you know, what insight can you draw kind of thing. But yeah, that's just the general template. So let's have a quick look about how we might do this as an example. So let me just recap. So, you know, if you've been following the Ace the Case series, you would know that we've been basically hypothetically walking through a real BCG case, which is an industrial goods case about a dynamite manufacturer with falling profit and profitability. So in that case, you know, we identified this framework we've got here. So you can see that the profit here is driven by revenue and cost. Revenue is driven by the price per unit you can get and the number of units you sell. Cost is driven by the fixed cost as well as the variable cost. Variable cost is driven by, you know, variable cost per unit again, and the number of units you sell. So this is the driver tree or the framework that's been established in, you know, the Ace the Case kind of framework video. And basically what you're trying to do here in an example is to refer back to it to make sure that the interviewer knows that you're working on this in a structured way, you know, that you can pull out of some deep analysis and still go back to your structure and still be able to kind of, you know, show that you've got a structured approach and that you're kind of not lost in the weeds. So this is the case context. So if, you know, pose this question, the interviewer would say at the end of some analysis, they'll say, hey Zizan, so actually what happens is you run into the senior client in an elevator and he asks you how the case is going. How would you respond? And a good example or a good answer might look a little bit something like this. Yes, so you asked us to look into the falling profit for you guys as the dynamite manufacturer. And, you know, we approached this by having a look at the revenue and costs. And our answer is basically yes. You know, we have noticed that profits are falling from 2013 to 2015 for a number of reasons. Number one, on the revenue side, we see a collapse in volumes, particularly in your smaller customers and medium customers, and not a lot of growth in your large customers to offset that. And then in your costs, we're basically seeing a jump in unit costs. So your variable cost per unit are jumping up despite the fact that your volumes are falling, or maybe because of the fact your volumes are falling, as well as your fixed costs are staying the same, especially in your small segment, even though the volumes have really dropped there. So all of those things are driving your profitability down, as well as your absolute level of profit down. So on that, we'll recommend 3 things to tackle those 3 problems. Number one, boosting volumes, either in one or more of the segments that you've got. So either kind of repairing that lost volume in small or further growing your large segment. And also on your cost side, finding ways to make your support costs more variable. So those fixed costs need to come down with the volumes that have come down. And also to remediate those unit costs that have somehow doubled over the last 2 years, perhaps through a kind of a structured negotiation program. So that's what I would recommend as next steps to kind of start on those 3 projects. So again, you can see in that answer that I kind of started with the answer that yes, profit's falling, started with the, went down to the drivers or the reasons, the insights around why it was falling, and then a set of kind of next steps about how we might address those things. So finally, I just want to talk about a few tips that can really differentiate yourself at this point. And the biggest thing is basically you have to keep it short. The interviewer, when asking you to close the case, is again looking to see that you can pull yourself out of this weeds because you've just been doing some analysis and you're like 20, 25 minutes, 30 minutes into this case where your mind has been kind of asked to think about a lot of different complex factors. You're really trying to show that you've still got control of the case. You've still got a good framework to work on and a structured approach to say, yeah, there's a lot of complex things going on, but I'm still structured and I still remember what exactly we're doing here to analyze and get to the answer here. So the more you can keep it short and concise, and the more you can tell what information matters from the stuff that doesn't matter, the better you're going to score here, basically. So in your answer to the client, summarize only the key information that's really related to the question they asked and not the minutiae of the details of all the analysis that you've been diving down into. So that's number one. And then number 2 is, always have a next step, because I guess, here you're kind of role-playing a consultant who, it shows that you're not basically just trying to answer the question from an analytical point of view. You're not trying to say like, you've been asked what's 2 + 2 =, and you just say, oh, it's 4. You want to show that you're basically thinking on behalf of the client to think about the fact that they actually have a holistic business problem that they not just want an answer to a specific question for, but also a solution. So the next step on an answer is obviously, okay, well, what are we going to do about it, right? So always have kind of a set of actionable next steps the client can take besides just the intellectual answer to what's going on in their business. So those are 2 tips to keep in mind to really perform well at closing the case. Well, that's the end of the Ace the Case series. So hopefully you guys have learned some things and are enjoying these videos. And yeah, let us know how it goes, and let us know how you find these videos in our Slack community, CasePrepHQ.com. Thanks.